we have the Department for Consular Services, we have the Department for Diaspora Services, we have public diplomacy, and then we have our missions abroad, which are comprised of embassies. We have 27 embassies, we have 10 high commissions, and 3 consulates. Madam Chair, in terms of embassies, if I may, for the record, we have an embassy in Abu Dhabi, Addis Ababa, Algiers, Ankara, Beijing, Berlin, Brussels, Bujumbura, Cairo, Copenhagen, Doha, Geneva, Havana, Juba, Khartoum, Kinshasa, Luanda, Mogadishu, Moscow, New York, Paris, Riyadh, Rome, Tehran, Tokyo, Vienna, and Washington, D.C. In terms of high commissions, we have Abuja, Canberra, Dar es Salaam, Kigali, New Delhi, Kuala Lumpur, London, Nairobi, Ottawa, and Pretoria. And consulates, we have, I beg your pardon, there are 4 consular posts. We have 1 in Dubai, which is missing in my presentation. We have Arusha, we have Gwangju, and Mombasa. As I said earlier, headquarters is Vote 006 with a budget for this financial year of 71.989 billion. And then we have missions abroad, whose votes are 501 to 538. And their total budget is 413.473 billion. Madam Chair, what does the ministry do? The ministry has 7 functional streams, and these functional streams, for the appreciation of the members, are representation. Now, representation is where we promote and protect the interests of the country. We represent government in bilateral relations, protect Ugandan citizens, and interests in every country of accreditation. Recently, when we had xenophobia, the xenophobia, should I call it outbreak, in South Africa, our mission in South Africa created reception centers across all the provinces of South Africa to register the Ugandans that needed to be repatriated, but also negotiated with the authorities to ensure that these Ugandans do not pay penalties, because as you'll appreciate, many had been in the country for over 10 years illegally, and it meant that either they go to prison or they pay fines. So the mission negotiated to ensure that they leave without paying fines, but also that they are not incarcerated for being illegal migrants in South Africa. So that's one of or some of the things that we do in as far as protection and promotion of our interests abroad is concerned. The other major function of the ministry is coordination. We coordinate all bilateral, regional, and multilateral activities between Uganda and all other countries. We coordinate to the extent that there is no correspondence, whether it's from the head of state or ministries or ministers, that goes out without going through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be delivered through diplomatic channels. And of course, by virtue of the fact that we are based in New York and Geneva, we represent the country and coordinate everything that relates to the UN in Geneva and New York. And of course, the African Union through our mission in Addis. The other major function is of economic and commercial diplomacy, where we look for access for exports, tourists, FDI mobilization, and technology transfer. All this is aligned to the ATMs. Then we have regional peace and security as a function. This one is extremely critical for us because it relates to our engagements in DRC. It relates to our engagement in Somalia, our engagements in South Sudan, and the efforts His Excellency General Yoweri Museveni is making in ensuring that Sudan, Khartoum, has peace. Then consular services, as I said earlier, we assist in passport renewals, visas for government officials, legal document authentication, state protocol, and the welfare of Ugandans abroad. Then public diplomacy, looking at the image, and then lastly, the function of diaspora, ensuring that there is engagement with the diaspora across all our missions, and also mobilizing them as much as possible to invest back in Uganda. Madam Chair, as you guided, there will be our colleague, Ambassador Idro, who will delve in economic and commercial diplomacy. Perhaps I may not have to go so much into detail of this, but as I said earlier, the aim is to ensure that we grow the economy tenfold, and that's why we are pursuing markets, promoting tourism, attracting foreign direct investment, as well as knowledge transfer. In terms of public diplomacy, diaspora and consular services, Uganda's image abroad is extremely important, and we have been pursuing strategic communication at headquarters and in the missions to frame Uganda as a stable, growing, and opportunity-rich country. Because, Madam Chair, what we see here with the missions that are accredited to Uganda, they are always, on a daily basis, seeking opportunities across government departments. Whether it's in agriculture, whether it is in Ministry of Energy, we see that they are pursuing opportunities for investors, or opportunities for their companies to come and do some work here. And it's the reason we pursue public diplomacy to project Uganda as a stable economy, and indeed Uganda is stable, to ensure that it attracts as much foreign direct investment as possible. And then, of course, our people, the Ugandans abroad, we have been consistently mobilizing them as an active constituency for investment, skills transfer, and remittances. And the policy that we are proposing is quite agile, and we are making some proposals to see that the Ugandan in the diaspora who are professional can participate in some of the projects in Uganda by easing the procurement of such individuals. There are instruments for the diaspora that we have seen. NSSF has Smart Life, and then we are also revisiting our discussions with Bank of Uganda to see if we can have a diaspora bond to which members of the diaspora can contribute to. Consular, the major consular issue, as I said earlier, is the labor externalization. That continues to be a very, very big pain point. On a weekly basis, we receive communication from colleagues in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, about Ugandans in distress who have run away from the places where they had been taken to work. Some of them are mentally ill and require attention. And those are some of the issues that we deal with or contend with on a regular basis. Unfortunately, labor externalization is in the scope of the Ministry of Gender, Labor, and Social Development. So they are the colleagues really who authorize and or register the companies that do labor externalization. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs suffers with the challenges, but we don't have much in terms of solutions on how to stop the carnage of sending Ugandans out for labor externalization without adequate protection. Madam Chair, as I said earlier, our major role is coordination. We coordinate the whole of government in as far as international relations is concerned, and we do that by working with our missions abroad, and we do that through liaison, the region and global blocks, and the aim in most cases is to ensure that we promote trade, tourism, and investment alongside the political objectives that we pursue. Madam Chair, in terms of diplomatic missions abroad, their functions and mandate, again, overall mandate is to promote and protect Uganda's interests in the host country and countries of accreditation. As you'll appreciate, we have 40 or so missions, and you find that a country like Kenya is accredited to 3 other countries, such as Seychelles, among others. So it's the responsibility of our colleagues or the team in Nairobi to make sure they cover the countries where they are accredited. And in terms of promoting and protecting interests, again, if I'm sticking to Kenya as an example, we export quite some milk in Kenya. At times, it is challenged by non-tariff barriers where the milk is stopped from entering the market. And it's our responsibility as diplomats to ensure that we negotiate and remove the barriers. We have had challenges with sugar, with our colleagues in Tanzania. Last week or the other week, a team from Tanzania was in Uganda to visit all the sugar factories to confirm that actually Uganda does manufacture sugar, because they thought we import and then a package here and then send it to them. So they came here and we took them across all the sugar manufacturing companies to ensure that they appreciate that actually the sugar is from Uganda, it's not imported and repackaged. The core functions of the missions are securing export, investment, tourism, consular, and lobbying, as well as regional security. But as I said, again, dealing with non-tariff barriers. In terms of mission clusters, there's multilateral hubs, trade capitals, regional labor hubs, and strategic emerging partners. Notable missions, 9 illustrative posts, UN, New York, and Geneva. We have Riyadh, we have Berlin, we have Mogadishu, we have Ottawa, and Kigali. Then output and modernization, 8 city chancelleries we have in the pipeline. We have rolled out the IT system, as I said, and expanded our consular service delivery. Operational challenges. We have a number of constraints. The major constraint that the ministry has is areas for international subscription. Madam Chair and honorable members, as you'll appreciate, it's the responsibility of our ministry to pay our dues to the UN, to pay our dues to the African Union, to pay our dues to the Commonwealth, to pay our dues to OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, among others, IGAD, among others. Unfortunately, we have not paid a number of these subscriptions for a given period, and the areas are in the region of 90 billion. We have a challenge of the cost of living. The cost of living to the extent that when the war broke out in Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine, the cost of gas went extremely high. But the foreign service allowance that we pay our missions has remained the same over time. So the cost of living is going high, but the resources available to us for the foreign service officers remain the same. Of course, we have a challenge of rented properties. We did take a paper to Cabinet, and Cabinet agreed with us that we can pursue a strategy of renting to own. So we are trying to work with the Ministry of Finance to see whether that experiment can work. As I said earlier, we have an overload on consular matters. We externalize labor in almost the entire Middle East, and that comes with a lot of challenges. There are so many Ugandans that are in distress, and that is coupled with the deliberate human trafficking in countries such as India, where many young Ugandans have been trafficked and are being sold like slaves. The budget profile, as I said earlier, our budget profile is 485.46, and 85% of that budget goes to the missions. And then, as I said, we have 90 billion as areas that remains unfunded. In terms of oversight considerations, there are 6 practical questions Parliament may press on: missions, value for money, the areas, the chanceries, migrants and staffing, as well as the system that we have recently developed. The overall mandate of missions abroad, again representing Uganda in the host state and countries of accreditation under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, which is the primary diplomatic channel between government and the host authorities. And then advancing Uganda's political, economic and security interests, looking at trade promotion, investment attraction, tourism, technology transfer, and security cooperation, multilateral lobbying. And then serve Uganda's citizens and diaspora in the areas of jurisdiction. And the consular services I have highlighted. In summary, the core functions of our missions are export market access, making sure that our coffee, tea, cocoa, dairy, and fish have access to markets. Honorable members, as you'll appreciate or you may know, China did offer a tariff-free regime for a number of African countries. It's now our duty and responsibility to ensure that Ugandan products get into the Chinese market so that we also tap into that 1 billion population market for our products. Investment attraction, working with the Uganda Investment Authority, we have set ourselves some targets and we are doing some mobilization of foreign direct investment. Then in terms of trade promotion, tourism promotion, I beg your pardon, we have participated in the Pearl of Africa Tourism Expo, a number of road shows, tour operator engagements, influencer familiarization tours, all to ensure that Uganda is seen as a viable destination for tourism. We have annual, on a yearly basis, we now have an annual diaspora conference, which we do in December when the members of the diaspora travel for their Christmas holidays. We take advantage, and we have had engagements on an annual basis in Munyonyo. Consular support, multilateral lobbying, peace and security continue to be as well the core of our missions abroad. Madam Chair, missions are clustered in Cluster A, B, C, D, and Cluster E. And these include Cluster A is New York, Geneva, Addis Ababa, and Brussels. And the core deliverables here are candidatures, treaty negotiations, human rights advocacy, continental policy shaping. Candidatures, to the extent that there are many Ugandans that seek to work in the UN, so we pursue their candidatures from New York and Geneva. And there are those who may want to work in the African Union. We pursue their candidatures through our mission in Addis Ababa. But as you know, or as we'll appreciate, there are many treaty negotiations that are done in New York. And then, of course, the organization, the UN Organization on Human Rights, sits in Geneva. And therefore, we have a duty to report. We have obligations to report on our human rights within that platform. Then for trade and investment capitals, we have Washington, D.C., London, Berlin, Paris, Beijing, Tokyo, Rome, Ottawa, and Canberra. And these are important markets for exports, for FDI, tourism, source markets, technology and skills transfer. Then, of course, the regional, our neighbors, where we do cross-border trade and augment East African integration and transit logistics, as well as peace and security. Then labor and migration hubs, which are Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, Doha, Kuala Lumpur, and Cairo. Here, we take care of the migrant welfare. We try as much as possible to stop trafficking. We coordinate Hajj or Umrah events, and then labor agreements. We have negotiated bilateral labor agreements with Riyadh, with Qatar, among others, all with the aim of ensuring that Ugandans that are externalized are treated with dignity. And then strategic emerging partners include Moscow, Ankara, Tehran, Havana, Algiers, Luanda, Pretoria, and Guangzhou. And these basically are for diversification, but as well as South-to-South cooperation. Madam Chair, in terms of planned outputs and the modernization agenda, my colleagues will present this in detail, but ownership rather than renting is what we are trying to pursue by constructing, renovating, and acquiring missions. We have completed ongoing chancelleries and official residence projects. London, we completed the renovation of the residence, but this financial year we are going to start on the renovation of Trafalgar Square, which is critical, which is, as you'll appreciate, we acquired this property in the 70s, but it had never undergone any major refurbishment. So this is the first time we are going to refurbish this particular property, and the authorities in London have been asking us to ensure that the property is really well taken care of. We are concluding Brussels, we are concluding Guangzhou, we are concluding Ottawa. Then we have Dar es Salaam, Abu Dhabi, we got the residence, Mombasa, we are also concluding, as well as Copenhagen. And again, we extend our sincere gratitude to the committee for the support you have accorded us to ensure that we either acquire or renovate these properties. Madam Chair, as I said earlier, we have pursued automation of our consular services. As you'll appreciate, right now, the entire government acquires diplomatic notes for travel in an automated form. We no longer receive letters requesting for diplomatic notes. The application is done online, and the team processes it within hours. So it doesn't take days, as was the case in the past. And I said earlier, we have also automated all our functions. The consular services in the missions are also automated. The bilateral activities that we do have been automated. In future, Chair, if you need a report on what a certain mission is doing bilaterally, we shall be able to print it instantly. And if indeed they have not done anything, there will be nothing to print, and it will expose them. Operational challenges are accumulated, as I said earlier, accumulated areas, which actually is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, we are trying to promote the good image of the country. On the other hand, we are not paying subscriptions. We have had embarrassing situations whereby we have been put on notice that we are going to attend the African Union, but the microphone of the head of delegation shall not turn red, as you can see this particular one. In other words, they won't be able to speak. And it puts us in a very unpalatable scenario, and we seek the support of the committee to help us to deal with this matter once and for all. The high cost of living in stations, I did mention that. Our allowances have not been revised for a long time now. We need a review on these ones. The allowances for foreign service officers. There is exchange rate volatility. There's a depreciation. In some cases, you have appreciation, but in most cases, it's depreciation of the shilling against the hard currencies. Infrastructure decay and rented premises. Now, as I've mentioned, we had never done a major renovation on Trafalgar Square, our mission in London. And year in, year out, there is no provision for resources for maintenance. What that means is that the structures decay for over a long time, and therefore the cost of renovation becomes extremely high. Then, of course, we have some missions that don't have substantive heads as yet. We know that actually the president is working on them. We don't have a substantive head in Ottawa, Abuja, Nairobi, and Tehran. We are building capacity of our officers, but we had inadequate specialized staff, trade attaches. But our colleagues in the Ministry of Trade have now started posting trade attaches. And again, as I said earlier, rising consular pressure. Labor externalization is driving so many cases of distress of Ugandans. There are Ugandans that are in prison, and they're in prisons in places where we don't have an embassy. In places like Iraq, you have a number of Ugandans who are in prison there. Our mission that handles them is Iran. As you know, there is a war in Iran, and therefore our diplomats are here in Uganda, so it becomes a bit hard to give them the consular services that we ought to. So we have operational challenges there. Then there's the challenge of weak inter-MDA coordination. One of the major challenges we are facing in our ECD efforts, economic and commercial diplomacy efforts, is getting genuine prospective investors, and they are frustrated by the other MDAs where we take them. An investor comes, he wants to add value to a certain agricultural product, you pass them to the Ministry of Agriculture, and then there is no response for weeks, for months, and at times even for a year, and we miss those opportunities. The unfortunate thing is, those opportunities now go to the next country where they are more responsive. So weak inter-agency coordination is a big challenge. Non-tariff barriers, again, these ones are extremely a major challenge. And Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, we need to find a solution for this. We are beginning to lose companies or industries in Uganda that are moving to Tanzania and or Kenya because Uganda does not reciprocate. If they put non-tariff barriers on our products, Uganda will never reciprocate, and they know it. Uganda will continue to allow the products of the other country to come into our country. So the investors are like, since Uganda doesn't reciprocate, I might as well be in Tanzania and supply Uganda, since we are too much into the East African community, and we are not really retaliating. So just thought we should point that out and work together and see how perhaps we address that issue. The budgets are already gone through, and the key figures that are allocated to the missions, as well as headquarters. Madam Chair, those are the first three papers that I was required to present. With that, I beg to submit, but I'd also prepared a short presentation on the paper that you had requested me to do tomorrow. If you allow, I can go through that, but the tomorrow slot is still available. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this for this elaborate presentation, and it was flowing. I can tell you most of us here have been assigned to this committee for the first time. So that is again the basis for this induction, so that we do not start talking about things we do not understand. This was very good. For the other paper, you are available tomorrow. I'm requesting you should not be in a hurry so that you come back to, but we can see how it goes. After listening for a while, I know we have entered into time for the next papers, but I just wanted to check my colleagues if we can have 1 or 2 questions for clarification, because the details are coming in the subsequent presentations. Are there any questions, or we move? Yes, Honorable. I'll take 3 questions and then we move to the next. Yes, and your neighbor and you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I have a question, then a suggestion. Once again, I'm Tego Ronald Hanguja. I represent the people of Bunyole East. Chair, the PS made a presentation, and I was wondering, how do they handle we have a minister in charge of the state for regional affairs. Then we have a minister of state for East African community. How do you handle that when you are doing your work, that duplication of roles? Isn't that a wastage that government should think about in reducing, where we are even going into arrears?
Okay.
Then the other point was on the arrears. We need to prioritize as we go ahead in budgeting. This 90 billion should be fixed into the 480 something billion in terms of prioritizing and cutting down and restructuring the budget. Okay. This can be handled technically.
Thank you. Your neighbor, then we come to, oh, the hands are increasing. Okay, first him and then we come here.
Thank you very much, Honorable Madam Chair. My question is on the presentation made by the Permanent Secretary. My name is Willie Oma. I represent the people of Namaingo. You said one of the core role of this ministry is to protect the interest of Ugandans, both of course here and abroad. And we have been seeing a lot of foreigners in this country, some of them even moving around hawkering items on the streets. Looking at our neighbors in Kenya who come as far as buying maize to the local farmers, taking out the middlemen, the Ugandans. How are we protecting the interests of our local citizens here if we're allowing foreigners who don't have the worker permit to enter directly to the markets to begin even hawkering items on the streets where the local citizens will be doing those kind of jobs to earn a living? Are we protecting the interests of Ugandans when we're doing that? If we're paying a blind eye to that, and how are we handling it? I thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to him, Honorable Tana, and your neighbor, and then we'll stop with Honorable Gabriel.
Thank you, Chair. Wabusani Stephen again. Ushigai constituency, Budura district. Mine is one question, and then, but I will start with a comment. Madam Chair, I will start with a comment. After following the presentation of the PS, I want to commend the PS for the knowledge. At least, Madam Chair, I've been a technical officer. I've been working in Ministry of Trade. And in many cases, I've been engaged in these foreign missions when I was getting out of the ministry and what have you, ministry work.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, the issue of economic diplomacy, it was being handled by Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I wanted to find out from the PS of recent that it has been shifted to Ministry of Finance, which is coordinating. Where does the Ministry of Finance again get the expertise, the skill, and the knowledge of supervising? If you send the funds there, who supervises these issues now, if it's not the Minister of Finance, Minister of Foreign Affairs, supervising this economic diplomacy? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Tana.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, PS, for that wonderful presentation. I would like to present some information I came across and have a follow-up question from that. I recently came across a group of influencers that the mission from Moscow brought to Uganda, and I happened to engage with a few staff from the mission in Moscow, and they aired out some issues. After the sanctions and the Russia-Ukraine war, I think the SWIFT code in Russia has been switched off, which restricts the Russians to make online payments. And I believe our system for visas as Uganda is online. And we don't have visa on arrival for Russians. Now, with sanctions and travel restrictions to Europe and USA, I believe Uganda becomes a very suitable option for them to come as tourists and come to our country. However, they can't issue stickers and we don't have visa on arrival, yet I believe countries like Tanzania have already accepted. So what would be the procedure on getting visa on arrival for some of these countries, and how can we promote tourism through such channels? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Roberts.
Thank you very much. I'm Robert Sawagude Robert, Member of Parliament representing persons with disabilities. I want to thank you very much for your presentation. PS, I just have two concerns. One, we're looking at Ugandans living in the other countries, more so in the war-torn areas. You have talked about some of our people being imprisoned, and yet we don't have our missions there. I would want to find out, do we take on that extra role to sensitize our citizens not to travel in such war-prone areas, just the way the States is doing? It advises its citizens not to go to specific countries, say when there is war, for instance. Is our government silent about it? Are we taking on that role to let our people know that they should avoid such countries for now? That's something I would wish to find out, because I think it's very paramount for us to get that guidance from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now, the other one is about, Uganda respects international treaties and it's for our foreign policy. We have, for instance, we have international treaties, like Uganda signed and ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. On the 30th of March 2007, we signed the treaty, and we ratified it on the 25th of September 2008. However, of course, when we ratify and domesticate it, we ideally mean that we are ready to follow the guidelines, and we're ready to implement such treaties in our respective countries. It has come to my notice that if you compare other categories of vulnerable people like the youth and women, our people with disabilities are not being given the necessary support whenever they come and they are supposed to be participating in international fora. Please, we need some guidance and feedback on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Gabriel.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I would like to say that I bring in the committee institutional memory. PS, thank you very much for the presentation. The first question, or maybe clarification I would like to get from you, we are all aware that the biggest challenge the Committee of Foreign Affairs faces the issue of the Ugandans who work abroad, who are being incarcerated. But in the last parliament, I think we need to have a meeting with the Minister of Labor, as you clearly mentioned it, and your ministry, since it is the same government, and we see what we can come up with. Otherwise, we cannot continue reading the book of Lamentations all the time. This has been the same Lamentations. If you travel abroad, you really see a very big problem. And all the ambassadors, all our staff abroad, they are really crying for our people are in problems. Secondly, Uganda recently, the social media was awash, a call from the US president that Uganda, requesting Uganda to contribute peacekeeping mission to Gaza. I wanted to also, as a Committee of Foreign Affairs, to know how far this has been and what advice the Committee of Foreign Affairs of Parliament, the position of government we need to know, since we are the line committee. I would also like to find out about reclassification, as you read, but if you go to our missions, this one of the challenges they always present in all these missions, that they need to be reclassified, year in, year out, as we handle our budget processes. How far, what progresses are we making on that? Apart from just mentioning it, and there is no progress done at all over the years on the same. And lastly, I would also like to, in the same vein, to find out about subscriptions. What progress is government making about paying our subscriptions to these organizations? Is it just the same problem year in, year out, or there is some progress to that front? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think those are questions. Honorable Basasi. Let it be the last, because there is opportunity to ask more questions.
Thank you so much,
during
Honorable
the day.
Chair. For those that may not know me, my name is Abdul Bisaso, Member of Parliament, Kasanda South Constituency. I want to thank the PS for the elaborate presentation, and whenever I meet him presenting, I really feel he's very knowledgeable. I want to thank you, PS. But now my concern is on the outstanding obligations amounting to the 90.2 billion. I am only worried that we may look at people, we may be looked at internationally as people who are not meeting our obligations. Doesn't that hamper our reputation abroad? We would say maybe we don't have resources, but the budget of the ministry is about 480 something billion. Is it non-prioritization? Is it a matter of non-prioritization? Is it a matter of it is not serious that we need to pay? Is it not a strict obligation? What is the problem? And why should we really be looked at as people who do not want to meet our obligations? I thank you.
Thank you. PS, those are the questions to you. And maybe lastly, the public, the discussion is in the public, that why did you nominate Ambassador Otunu late to the UN position? Did you mean that he should fail by nominating him late? But those are the questions for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and honorable members, for all your interventions. The Honorable Mutego Anguja asked whether it's not wasteful to have regional affairs as well as Miyaka. Now, as I understand, the Ministry of East African Affairs is strictly handling matters related to the East African community integration. And However, the minister responsible for regional affairs actually handles all matters on the continent. All matters on the continent are handled by the minister responsible for regional affairs. And that does not include East Africa. It does include East Africa, but as you'll appreciate, the East African community operates from Arusha, and indeed Miaka does much of their work in Arusha. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs complements their work. Now, when it comes to negotiations for removal of NTBs, non-tariff barriers, and so on and so forth, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the minister responsible for regional affairs, does lead in that regard. But issues to do with the East African protocols, the federation, monetary integration, and so on and so forth, those are specifically handled by Miaka. The Honorable Ouma made mention of the Kenyan citizens that have removed middlemen and are coming to the gardens to pick maize and so on. Madam Chair and honorable members, I think those are some of the issues that come with integration. The free movement of goods, persons and goods, is what we really have been pursuing in the East African community. That can we have Ugandans move freely to Tanzania and do whatever they need to do, and can goods indeed as well move as freely as possible. So I know it disadvantages the middlemen, but in one way or the other, it promotes integration. Now, Honorable Wabusai Stephen did mention the role of the Ministry of Finance in ECD. What is true, the Ministry of Finance and we at Foreign Affairs did write the ECD strategy, the Economic and Commercial Diplomacy strategy. And that strategy is really well outlined. It gives the duties and responsibilities to each and every player, including actually the Ministry of Trade, because whatever we do as Foreign Affairs is actually for the benefit of other ministries. That is tourism, agriculture, trade, and so on and so forth. Now within that, we have a steering committee which the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs co-chair. And the reason we agreed to this strategy of co-chairing, we wanted a little bit of more convening power. Because as I said earlier, we get opportunities and then we fail to follow through, largely because our colleagues in the other ministries have not taken adequate attention on the opportunities that our missions have brought. So we found it necessary to co-chair the ECD implementation, and I must say, honorable members, that that is working well so far. And the team, I know we are going to have another presentation on ECD, but the team will give you details of how far we have gone in that collaboration. The Honorable Tana asked about the influencers and the reality that Russians can no longer make payments online. It's true, actually. The mission did write to us. They've raised the issue or the challenge of Russians getting visas, and we've been intervening. Having said that, we have written to the Ministry of Internal Affairs to allow for visas on arrival, and I think that is something that we are going to conclude with the Ministry of Internal Affairs, so that the Russians can receive visas on arrival in Uganda, as opposed to the online applications, which we know can no longer work as it is. Honorable Sewagude wondered whether we are doing much sensitization to the Ugandans, especially to avert or reduce the number of Ugandans in distress. It is true we have done quite some sensitization as the ministry, but I must also add that it is inadequate. The Ministry of Internal Affairs are the ones responsible for the law on anti-human trafficking. And they have the duty and responsibility to really do some massive sensitization for Ugandans to ensure that they don't fall prey over these lucrative, so-called lucrative opportunities, yet in actual sense, it's human trafficking. It has been very challenging for us. We did repatriate hundreds of Ugandans from Myanmar, but the unfortunate thing was the Ethiopian Airlines that brought, I think, the first 43 Ugandans now carried another 20 going in the same destination. Huh? Yes, as we were bringing, others were going. And how do we know? When they reached out to be rescued, we asked, when did you go? And it was actually a few days after we had rescued the first lot. Now, the other most unfortunate thing is that it is Ugandans that are trafficking Ugandans. Some of them are known. They've been tracked. Police has arrested some. But as you know, you arrest these ones and another group also forms up. But having said that, we shall intensify our campaign to stop these Ugandans from traveling. And again, like the colleagues in Iraq, the individuals that have been arrested and are in Iraq, we have reached out to the authorities. They are positive to release them, but now the challenge becomes the absence of resources to return them. Now, when you reach out to the, as you'll appreciate, there is no appropriation to return Ugandans. Now, when they reach out and say, okay, your prisoners are here, you have them, because some of them is actually for petty offenses. It's not something like murder, but petty offenses. And then we find ourselves in a dilemma whereby the relatives cannot even contribute for money for them to return. So that's one of the challenges that we have. The other issue, the other question, I think from Honorable Sawagude again, was on the UN Convention on Persons with Disability, which we really appreciate and associate with, and the support. We want to pledge that indeed we had an incident where I think some members were supposed to travel, and the support prescribes that support is given to government officials only. But I think for members, people with disability, I think it's an oversight to assume that the people who support them are not part of government. Because indeed, if they support them, it's important, like the gentleman I see supporting the honorable member here, it's only in order that they are also supported when their travel comes up. Unfortunately, if it finds an officer who is not aware, it may not be regarded as such, but we shall advise the team that handles consular services. Their head is right here, Evans, to ensure that whenever they appear before us and they need support, they are supported. And in the past, actually, I know we have extended support to a number of members with disability to ensure that they travel and execute their duties with the support team. But we shall ensure that that is streamlined in our internal policies so that in future there are no challenges. Now, on the Honorable Gabriel raised the issue of Ugandans in the diaspora, but also the peacekeeping mission in Gaza. Now, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, we have not received information officially that Uganda shall participate in the peacekeeping mission. But what I know, I think it is either constitutional that the country cannot deploy without permission of Parliament. My understanding is that at an appropriate time, the responsible ministry, most likely the Ministry of Defense, shall appear before Parliament to seek that permission before the deployment is done. That's my expectation. So at that point in time, Parliament will be fully informed, and then will associate with that peacekeeping mission. Now, the other issue on reclassification and so on that has been around, it is true. Madam Chair, we did take a cabinet paper in Parliament, we took a paper in cabinet to talk about the challenges in our missions, matters to do with reclassification, including international subscriptions. Arising out of that paper, Cabinet advised us to prepare another paper to reduce the number of missions that we have. And we have since prepared that paper, and we shall present it as a measure to address the challenges related to subscription and the challenges of reclassification. So we have taken action by presenting a paper to Cabinet. Arising out of that paper, we were guided to reduce the number of missions that we have. Of course, our argument has been less than 40 missions is not too many out of 193 countries that are recognized by the UN, but we stand guided that we take a paper to reduce the number of missions. And I think that also addresses the Honorable Bisaso's question, and it is true our reputation is injured if we don't pay subscriptions. Uganda is viewed as a growing economy. They can't reconcile the fact that Uganda cannot pay subscriptions, and the other smaller economies are paying subscriptions. So that's something that we need. But the Honorable Nguja had mentioned rationalizing the budget here. If you analyze this budget, you'll find that the budget is for rent, for the diplomats. When we send diplomats out, we pay their housing. We pay their, we pay for somewhere we don't have, we own property, we pay for the housing. So if you scrutinize it, you'll find that actually these are operational costs that you're dealing with across the missions. And then lastly is Ambassador Olaro Tunu as a late entrant. Honorable Chair and honorable members, the unfortunate thing is there's not necessarily a deadline on when a Secretary General for the UN should submit. I think there's still even a window, if I'm not mistaken, for someone to come in and submit. So someone may come in tomorrow to submit their candidature. Having said that, we received a directive, and when we received the directive, we immediately implemented it without any delay. I think we made the submission the day we were directed to do so. So we are pursuing his candidature, we are supporting it, and we are hopeful that we have a chance. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Indeed, thank you so much. And this first session has been a big eye-opener, which is going to help us understand the subsequent meetings. My colleagues have showered you with praises, and you deserve it. For colleagues, the PS was a member of Parliament and the chair of ICT in the 9th Parliament, so he's part of us in a way. Treat us well, PS. We don't need a break. We are doing working tea. So we are going to open to the next sessions which are coming. And I still give it to the PS by our time. We are, what time? This is 11:30. We should have been somewhere in the middle. So I expect some elaborate, concise presentations so that we can do as much as possible. Who is the next? Progress of regional integration and Uganda's participation in regional and multilateral organizations.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning once again. I'm Edith Namtevi in Uganda. I head the Regional Peace and Security Department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The topic given to me is progress of regional integration and Uganda's participation in regional and multilateral organizations. I had done that as an outline, but for sure, my permanent secretary has done a wonderful job to the extent that I'm disarmed.
So be brief and...
yes.
Okay.
To the extent that I'm disarmed. However, let me take just through the next slide, please. Okay, that is it for purposes of understanding, considering the fact that some members of the committee are coming from outside the foreign affairs context. Regional integration is where sovereign states voluntarily enter into agreements to coordinate policies, reduce barriers, and increase cooperation to achieve shared economic, political, and security objectives. While multilateralism appears to be the same, it is bigger, it's broader than regional integration. However, for regional integration, next slide, please. Regional integration is restricted to states belonging to that specific geographic region. So multilateralism is beyond the geography. For example, we are in ESC, we are in ICG-LARA, Great Lakes Conference, we are in IGAD because we are in the East African part of Africa, and for IGAD we are in the Horn of Africa. But we are in the UN, we are in NAM, we are in G77. So that is multilateralism. It's beyond the geography. Next slide, please. So even this, the PS touched them at length. But for Uganda, regional integration is driven by geographic imperatives. It's not that we choose to go there, but our geography pushes us to be there. Structure economic realities, yes, we need to trade, and our long-term strategic vision, to the extent that our plans position regional integration as a fundamental engine for socio-economic transformation that is highlighted in the Vision 2040, as the PS put them. NRM Manifesto, Vision 2040, the tenfold strategy. So why do we have to do this integration, regional integration, and why do we have to be members to multilateral organizations? The reasons are several, but to just summarize them, one is overcoming geographical limitations. As you may be aware, we are a landlocked nation. Therefore, Uganda's access to global maritime trade routes depends entirely on its transit neighbors, principally Kenya in the northern corridor and Tanzania in the central corridor. We have therefore, that is why in our foreign policy we have that permanent interest to access the sea. So we integrate for those reasons. Then for economic expansion and economies of scale, we expand Uganda's immediate duty-free market to over 300 billion people across the ESC and over 1.3 billion under the African Continental Free Trade Area. So we can only do that if we choose to integrate. Next slide, please. Then collective security and regional peace architectures. Uganda's security strategy recognizes that internal security is highly linked to the stability of its borderlands and neighbors. You are well aware that geographically we are shallow, too close to, from Mutukula to Kampala is just 6 hours, Arua to Kampala is 8 hours. So in case of danger, we can just be wiped away in just a matter of minutes or seconds. So we do this in order to mitigate cross-border threats, like issues of terrorism, forced us to be in DRC under Operation Shuja. We are in Somalia under OSOM, that is an African Union arrangement. So we can only do that if we integrate. Then we have to also protect our economic interests. You know that instability in major export destinations, those of you who are a little older, you remember the after elections in Kenya, the post-violent election, the post-violence, was it 20 sometime? In Kenya, that's where we were affected. So we have to ascertain that we integrate, we live in harmony with our neighbors so that we also protect our economic interests. Then as Uganda, we do also, the other reason is shared infrastructure and natural resource management. As you may be aware, most of our natural assets and infrastructure networks are transboundary in nature. Lake Victoria is shared, the Nile River is shared, Lake Edward is shared, and you know, even most of our resources are in that transboundary area, Virunga area, Albertine region. They are also shared. So that necessitates us to work with others. We can't work in isolation. Then why do we think of multilateral organization? We joined the UN, we are members of NAM, G77, WTO, Commonwealth, you know, all those. One of the reasons is multilateral engagement facilitates access to grants, concessional loans, and technical assistance. For example, engagement with the World Bank and IMF has historically secured significant financing for development projects. As much as we are moving, we are changing direction, but World Bank and IMF really buffered us for quite a while. So working through global institutions like the United Nations, World Trade Organization, Uganda has continued to advocate for development financing, fair global trade standards, and South-South cooperation. You know we have UNBs, yes, Uganda National Bureau of Standards, so they can only regulate standards if we are members of the WTO that sets global standards for trade. Then by participating in these forums, Uganda demonstrates its commitment to international norms, human rights, and good governance, which helps in countering negative international publicity and strengthening political relations. So that is why we go an extra mile to subscribe to these multilateral organizations. PS has also taken us through this. I won't spend more time on that. But acquiring membership in regional organizations such as the AU or the ESC and multilateral bodies such as UN is a formal legal process governed by international law and the specific founding documents of each organization. ILSA will take us, our legal department will take us through the process. But based on that, when we sign to these organizations, we become members, and we are therefore supposed to undergo all those processes and abide by the rules that we sign to. So domestically, we have done those acts based to allow us to be in those organizations. They've taken us through them, and I know Elsa will also talk about them. So we are not just there, we are there because we subscribe to there and we went through the required processes. What do we benefit as Uganda in joining these regional bodies and the multilateral organizations? Can I have the next, please? Okay. One is robust regional export markets. Data from the Ministry of Finance and the Uganda Bureau of Statistics highlights that intra-EAC trade yields over $631 million in regional exports in just a single quarter. Because under EAC, we have the treaty first, we have the customs union. The customs union talks about the common external tariff, simplified trade regimes. So it helps facilitate trade and remove tariff barriers, as well as non-tariff barriers. Then infrastructure and logistical corridors. You've heard of Northern Corridor integration. Regional integration frameworks like the Northern Corridor Transit and Transport Agreement mitigate Uganda's landlocked trade disadvantages, where transport costs consume up to 40% of an item's value. Deploying joint customs measures and electronic tracking/cargo transit times from Mombasa to Kampala from 21 days to 3 or 4 days. That is a plus on our, it facilitates our trade as well. Then we leverage diplomatic leverage and regional security. Uganda leverages its standing within regional bodies to anchor regional peace initiatives. You know, we have peace supporting peace supporting missions in Somalia, and these are operationalized under the African Union. So if we are not members, perhaps we wouldn't be able to go there under that framework. We are the guarantors of peace for South Sudan because we are members of IGAD. So IGAD is Intergovernmental Authority on Development. So if in case we are not, perhaps we wouldn't be able to guarantee peace in South Sudan. So that gives us leverage. Also, regional security architectures and protocols help combat transnational threats, including terrorism. We have a protocol on that under IGAD framework and on violent extremism under EAC. So based on those frameworks, we are able to do interventional activities. We are able to deploy, be members of the Eastern African Standby Force. We are able to deploy to countries that would perhaps, where conflict would perhaps affect our trade and stability of the country. Yeah, for multilateral engagement, multilateral cooperation facilitates joint management and sharing of critical transboundary resources, including hydroelectric power pools, regional grids. You've heard of the Eastern African Power Pool. We have under the management of major water bodies like Lake Victoria, and we have the Nile Basin Initiative, now commissioned. The Lake Edward, at least for Lake Edward, it has reduced skirmishes along the lake, the boundaries, our boundaries between Uganda and DRC, along that area. Before it was havoc, but now at least with LEAF coming in place, and with Uganda subscribing to that, at least we are able to reduce skirmishes there. Then labor mobility and professional integrity. Under the EAC common market specifically, this guarantees the free movement of workers, services, and capital across partner states: Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan, DRC, and Somalia. So Ugandans can move visa-free to all these countries, and for Kenya and Rwanda, we can even move passport-free. That is only possible under the EAC Common Market Protocol. The EAC is at now monetary union level, but up to now we have not. The deadline was 2024, as much as we signed, but there is slow progress. But at least it's moving somewhere. Looking at political federation in the future. So for our membership at the UN. And its specialized agencies, such as those, Uganda anchors its national development plans, humanitarian responses, and global standing within, because we are members. We wouldn't be having the 1.6 million refugees we have, we are hosting, if we are not members of the UN. At least under there, we can do all that. We have an annual net official development assistance and grants received by Uganda historically above 2 billion, heavily backed by UN agency frameworks targeting poverty reduction, healthcare, and education. Then multilateral UN channels and associated global facilities deliver critical medical supplies, technical backing, and millions of vaccine doses during health crises. Hosting the UN Regional Service Center in Entebbe drives local employment, boosts the service sector, and increases foreign exchange earnings. You know, we have that center in Entebbe, the UN logistical hub that services UN operation missions within the region. Then Uganda leverages substantial multi-million-dollar funding from UN agencies like the UNHCR World Food Programme to manage settlements for over 1.5 million refugees under its globally loaded progressive refugee policy. So we benefit. As a member of OIC, that is what we benefit. OIC brought us a university here, Islamic University in Uganda, and the support that OIC extends, the scholarships that they extend to students, including that, the 65 million insurance cover for Akibwa. So we benefit as a country by being members to these organizations. That is what we, next slide please. We also benefit from the WTO as such, the standards. We can't trade globally if we are not aligned to the global standards. So basically, our engagement in regional integration and multilateral organizations benefits as a country in those following ways. That's for WTO. We also have for NAM, we also have for Commonwealth, we also have for G77. We are now a member of an observer status in BRICS. So as Uganda, we should just continue to ascertain that our membership is consolidated in most of those organizations, because for sure we benefit as a country. However, despite the benefits, as the ministry, we face challenges, or as a country, we face challenges. Uganda faces challenges in its participation in regional and multilateral organizations. The PS also talked about these challenges, but allow me to just identify those that he never looked at. For example, this is not for Uganda per se, the slow progress of integration in the ESC. As much as we are pushing for the integration up to the political federation, we are still facing challenges because some countries pursue protectionist tendencies, and that deters our progress. But as a country, based on our mandate, we still push for integration. For example, by now, the African Monetary Union would be in place, but it has been pushed to 2031. The political federation would have been done by 2030, but we are still reviewing the study. So, as much as countries have committed to integrate, but the onus is on the member state, on each individual member state to pursue and domesticate what they have agreed to adhere to. Then we have persistent non-tariff barriers. We also talked about them earlier. there are roadblocks, there are quotas, there are axoloads, despite the free movement of goods and services. So those protectionist tendencies also still affect us as a country, but we continue to undertake bilateral engagements outside the regional ones. That is why you hear there is this other bilateral meeting or JPC between Uganda and Kenya, where we talk about specific trade barriers between Uganda and Tanzania. So as much as we have the ESC, but we also push for the bilaterals. Then the geopolitical tensions and border disruptions. These ones, we are in a land, maybe conflict-locked area, because most of the countries surrounding us are conflict-bound. So those tensions still do exist. There are trust deficiencies in the region, but nonetheless, we continue to pursue our interests through bilateral engagements, through membership through these regional bodies, and through multilateral engagements as well. The other issue that affects us is overlapping membership and policy conflicting frameworks. This one is an internal problem, overlapping membership. As much as the the geography, the economic will push us to sign up for membership in these bodies, but the onus is really on us to choose where to go. But you find we are an ICJLARA as a member. And then we are also in the regional oversight mechanism under the Peace and Security Cooperation Framework under the AU. So under the Rome Regional Oversight Mechanism, we are the chair. Under ICJLARA, we are not the chair, but we are members. But if you find what they are doing, it's about peace and security in the region, the Great Lakes region. So we are members there. And then also, we are members of COMESA. At the same time, we are members of ESC. As much as COMESA subscription doesn't come from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but it comes from trade as well, which is also part of our government coffer. So what you find that maybe ESC, if we are in ESC, then perhaps we would reconsider our engagement in COMESA. But you find we are in COMESA, we are in ESC, we are in IGAD, so, and to all these we have to pay subscriptions. Then non-adherence to rules of procedure. This is outside our control, but it's within the regional bodies where the rules are set, but for some, even convening statutory meetings is not by schedule. They don't follow the subscribed schedule to hold such statutory meetings. So all these are challenges we face in our engagement in those regional bodies. Then non-payment of subscriptions, they've talked about that. The PS has talked about that. Fragmentation and overlap I've talked about it. For non-payment of subscriptions, note that payment of subscriptions to internal organizations is necessary to maintain Uganda's good standing and credibility in the international community, safeguard Uganda's voting rights and full participation in decision-making processes of those organizations. However, fulfilling financial membership obligations remains a persistent hurdle marked by budget shortfalls and high accumulation of arrears, as presented in the table below. I'm not going to go through the table because I know our F&A will go through it. But in total, like my permanent secretary alluded to, in total we have, he said 90 billion. It's 20, yeah, I would say it in dollars. It's that amount in dollars, and still we are indebted. And moreover, even for this financial year, we have very little to pay for our subscriptions. That means the areas continue to accumulate. Any officer, any foreign service officer you will find will talk about this because it's embarrassing. It affects our standing as a country. It takes away our voting rights. But that is the situation. It's challenging. Then what should we do in order to mitigate all this? These are just proposals. Next slide, please. Yeah, to maximize the economic security and diplomatic returns from participation in regional and multilateral organizations, Uganda ought to do the following. We may, these are proposals like I said, we may consider scaling down, and we prioritize based on statutory financial obligations. Because if we feel we can't commit financially, then why do we have to continue maintaining our membership there? Then we ought to accelerate domestication and harmonization of regional protocols. For example, we signed and ratified the African Continental Free Trade Area. We signed and ratified, but we have not signed the Niamey Convention on Cross-Border Management that facilitates the other one. Which other? Maybe the legal department will give cases. We have signed the free movement of ESC, but we've not signed the free movement of the protocol on free movement of persons under the African Union. Yet we have signed the convention, the treaty on the free trade area. So you find that there is that laxity in domesticating and harmonizing these regional protocols. Then boosting export competitiveness and value addition. Our ECD department will talk about this at length. WTO is there to support us. The standards are there. Under EU, we have the IBA, everything but arms. But you find that we can't meet the standards because of phytosanitary and sanitary measures, or challenges. You've heard of aflatoxins. So these are some of the challenges that we have to address right from the bottom of the value, the lower part of the value chain, starting from the production level. But as foreign affairs, we cannot have control over these. So this is why we do the whole of government approach when we are handling some of these activities. For enhancing commercial and economic diplomacy, yes, I know that it's a full topic. By retooling foreign missions are at it, and we just need to be supported. Then deepening security cooperation and proactive mediation. This helps us isolate our transport corridors. I know that Ugandans will say, why are we in DRC? Why are we building that road? Yes, we are building that road because we gain 800 million US dollars in terms of export value, and the road is 356. So maybe we need to look at the mathematics of it, and we value what our leadership is doing and continue to support. So before I conclude, there is a slide that I missed. What's the role of Parliament or the committee? What do we ask for under regional integration and multilateralism from the committee? Our dear honorable members, while your work is oversight, but most of the protocols and conventions we sign have to be domesticated and be aligned with our national laws. So it is our plea that you support us whenever such comes up. And you also represent our citizens. They don't know perhaps what we are doing, but since for you, your citizen representatives, perhaps our visibility can be achieved when you talk about us. By us, I mean foreign affairs. So you should be our voice where we are not. If I had the powers of the PS perhaps, or the minister, I would recruit you as our ambassadors as well to the grassroots communities. Then we also request you to advocate for the increased pass for contributions, because unless we pull out following the measures taken place there's normally a clause in all protocols and conventions of how we can pull out. Unless we follow those the procedures to pull out. Unless we do that, we are still members. So if we are still members, we are obliged to do what we are required to do. So please kindly, we also request you to advocate for us, and we also request you to support the ratification and domestication of the treaties and conventions if they are brought up. Then increase the ministry's visibility in the House and in the grassroots communities which you represent. So as in conclusion, while Uganda's active participation in regional integration and multilateral organizations remains a cornerstone of our foreign policy and our socio-economic transformation agenda, securing vital market access, development aid, and geographical stability, maximizing these benefits requires decisively overcoming structural bottlenecks like non-tariff barriers, implementation lags, and financial areas. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation, highlighting a lot of the benefits of why Ministry of Foreign Affairs should be there and all these relations that we are promoting. So without wasting time, again, let's go to the next paper. Treaty making in Uganda, negotiations, ratification, domestication, implementation, and parliamentary oversight of international obligations. Again, if you can summarize and be brief, you don't need to repeat what the PS has already done.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and honorable members of Parliament. I hope my presentation was shared to be. Chair, with your permission, I could proceed as the presentation is being projected.
Yes, please.
All right. Madam Chair, my name is Anne-Mary Nyakato. It's my pleasure to make this presentation on behalf of the Ministry on treaty making in Uganda, highlighting negotiations, ratification, domestication, implementation, and parliamentary oversight. Chair, as my PS correctly pointed out, is one of our objectives in our foreign policy directive is the respect for international law and its obligations. And you will note, Chair and members, that our national law is limited to only the borders of Uganda. Once you cross the borders, you are subjected to international and regional law. So how is international and regional law created? Treaties are the primary instruments through which states establish legally binding rights and obligations. Treaty is an important tool for advancing national interests, promoting regional cooperation and integration, attracting investment, protecting human rights, combating transnational organized crime, strengthening cooperation with other states and international organizations. Treaty making, the effective treaty making process involves careful negotiations, ratification of agreed upon instruments, domestication into national law where necessary, implementation through coordination actions by the relevant stakeholders, and continuous parliamentary oversight to ensure compliance and accountability. Chair, just to note that a treaty is really defined as an international agreement concluded between states in written form and governed by international law. It can be in a single instrument or it can be in a number of instruments. Thank you. If you can just move to slide 2. Slide 2 just gives you a highlight. The next slide, please. The next slide, please. Okay. All right. So the next slide is just to give you a flow chart. Exactly. Thank you. Chair and members, this slide just gives you a flow chart of what treaty making process looks like. It begins with a negotiation, which is basically interministerial consultations, and then cabinet approves the signing of the instrument, and then we go to parliamentary approval if necessary for ratification, and if not necessary, presidential consent. Then we have the domestication process. Then we have the implementation, and then the parliamentary oversight. I was defining for you what a treaty is, and it's really an international agreement concluded between states. It has to be in written form, and it's governed by international law. It could be in a single instrument, but it can also be in a number of related instruments. States sign on to treaties to just demonstrate their consent to be governed by that particular treaty, but also to show that they are willing to be bound by the obligations that arise out of that treaty. If you could move to the next slide. Treaties can be classified in two ways. One is that we have bilateral treaties, which are really concluded between two state parties or two countries. The other is multilateral treaties, which involve two or more states or organizations. The major treaties that we sign are really can also be further classified into an agreement and a memorandum of understanding. An agreement, on the face of it, is legally binding, and the parties to that agreement are obliged to meet the obligations under that particular agreement. A memorandum of understanding, on the other hand, is not necessarily legally binding. It just expresses the interest of states or parties to that agreement or memorandum of understanding, and it's not legally enforceable. So we have a number of MOUs that we have signed with many of the countries, and we also have agreements that we have also signed. So what is the legal framework that governs treaty making in Uganda? We have the Constitution of Uganda, the 1995 Constitution as amended, under Article 123(1) provides that the President or person authorized by the President may make treaties, conventions, agreements, or other arrangements between Uganda and other states or international organizations. Article 123(2) says Parliament must ratify treaties that affect the sovereignty, security, or require legislation to give effect. In essence, the Constitution places the powers to make treaties within the President, in the President, or the person authorized by the President. I must say that Uganda lacks a specific statute or regulations that governs the entire treaty-making process, and we are generally governed by the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, which is the guiding instrument for procedural and substantive rules, but it's also the customary law instrument on making of treaties. When it comes to negotiation treaties, the process of negotiation is really determined, among others, by the definition of the treaty and the scope. If the treaty is a bilateral treaty, it is basically negotiated in person or through diplomatic correspondence. But when it comes to multilateral treaties, they cannot be negotiated through diplomatic correspondence. We must attend in person. And these multilateral treaties take place within the international fora, either the United Nations, the African Union, the East African Community, IGAD, and others, or international organizations that are independent of the UN, but of which we are parties to, like the International Atomic Energy Agency or the ICRC. The negotiation is also determined by our legal and policy framework. As the PS already hinted, is that we have the national objectives and directive principles of state policy that really set the pace or give us guidance on how to negotiate treaties. One is the promotion of national interests. The other is the treaty must lead to peaceful coexistence. There must be an issue of regional integration, but also the respect for international law or cooperation. In other words, you cannot negotiate a treaty that negates the obligation in another treaty. So when we're negotiating treaties, what do we think about? One is that the proposed text of that treaty must be legally sound and consistent with Uganda's constitutional framework. It must not impose unrealistic financial or administrative obligations. It would be careless on our end if we entered into a treaty that gives us obligations to pay monies that we cannot afford. We must ensure that while negotiating, we align with national development priorities and our foreign policy objectives, but also where necessary, because we are negotiating treaties with so many other states, so we are not in control of the process. So where necessary, we may make reservations, declaration, or interpretative statements that are formulated to safeguard our national interests. If you can move to the next slide. Then we have institutional coordination. The negotiation team is coordinated generally by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And many a times, if you're going to negotiate on behalf of the Republic of Uganda, you will need credentials to do that, because the credentials mean that you have the authority to speak on behalf of the country. The negotiating team should include representatives from relevant MDAs as well as technical experts, depending on the subject matter. But what we think about in terms of competencies when we are putting negotiation teams together is that you must have at least diplomatic skill to balance national and international interests. You must have legal expertise on your team to interpret and draft provisions accurately. You must have technical knowledge that's relevant to the subject matter of the treaty. And then there must be interministerial coordination to ensure a unified national position. Now, when it comes to signing of treaties, after the negotiations are concluded, a treaty is usually opened up for signature. Under Article 12 of the Vienna Convention, a signature may have different effects depending on what the treaty provides for. But generally, a signature establishes consent. It means as a state, you're consenting to the principles of the treaty, but not necessarily being legally bound by the treaty. For you to be legally bound by the treaty may require further ratification. Please note that a treaty has to be signed by only two persons under the law. Under the Vienna Convention, it's either the head of state or the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Any other person to sign a treaty must receive permission from either the head of state or the Minister of Foreign Affairs. However, the exceptions where ambassadors are given what they call plenipotentiary powers. So these are given the authority or the full powers to represent the countries or the states in the negotiation of treaties in multilateral fora. When we sign treaties, we are obliged to respect the principles of the treaty. But as I've mentioned, many of these treaties require ratification. So after you've signed a treaty, we usually start a process of ratification. Ratification is provided for under our Ratification of Treaties Act. And under that Ratification of Treaties Act, there are two types of ratification. You can be ratified by, a treaty can be ratified by Parliament, or a treaty can be ratified by Cabinet. Under Article 123(2) that I've already mentioned, provides that Parliament must ratify treaties that affect Uganda's sovereignty, relate to peace and security, or neutrality, or require legislation to give effect domestically. Now, what happens is that many times treaties, there are very few treaties that would require parliamentary ratification. Many treaties fall within the ratification by Cabinet. So for the treaties that fall within the ratification by Cabinet, you're required to get a certificate, what we call a clearance from the Attorney General's office, to confirm that the treaty does not fall within the category that is required to be ratified by Parliament. You will also be required to get a certificate of financial implications that ensure that Uganda can actually meet its obligations without undermining fiscal stability. Then we'll also have to undertake stakeholder consultations to ensure or guarantee inclusivity and considerations of national interests. After that process is done, then the treaty is presented to Parliament, to Cabinet, who then ratifies it or gives a formal minute, which is then forwarded to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for action. Once Cabinet has approved the ratification of a particular instrument, the Cabinet extract is forwarded to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who then prepares an instrument of ratification or ascension. That instrument of ratification is then deposited with a relevant international body or partner state. Under Section 5 of the Ratification of Treaties Act, the Ministry or the Minister responsible for Foreign Affairs is the depository of Uganda of all treaties. What does this mean? This means that every single agreement, whether it's an MOU, an agreement, a treaty that is signed for and on behalf of Uganda, a copy of it must be deposited within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as the depository of Uganda. And many times, as the PS has already mentioned, is that we are required to register some of these agreements with, for example, the United Nations or other regional depositories to give effect to these agreements. If the agreements come under contention, for example, under the International Court of Justice or any other international judicial body, it would be asked whether that particular agreement had been registered with either the UN or other depositories, to give it legal effect, in other words. So what is the role of Parliament in treaty making? As I've already mentioned, the Ratification Act gives Parliament the responsibility to ratify the treaties that fall within the areas that I have mentioned, but also, even when treaties are not ratified by Parliament and are ratified by Cabinet, the Act provides that those treaties shall be laid before Parliament as soon as possible. So the Minister of Foreign Affairs is legally obliged to lay before Parliament a treaty that has been ratified as soon as possible. And this process basically ensures that there is transparency, that there is accountability, that there is oversight, and that there is democratic legitimacy. So after treaties have been ratified, the next process is domestication. Uganda is a dualist state, and being a dualist state means that even when we ratify a treaty, it does not automatically become effective in our countries. It has to be domesticated. So it does not automatically become part of our domestic law. We have to go through a process of domestication. What does domestication mean? Is that Parliament must enact a legislation to give effect to the treaty obligations. And sometimes this requires a new law, or many times it requires us to amend our existing laws, or sometimes to just provide for regulations or action plans or programs to just give effect to the obligations that arise out of these treaties. After we've done the domestication, just to note that without domestication, Ugandan courts cannot directly enforce treaty provisions. You'll see many a times judges will just make mention of conventions that have not been necessarily domesticated, but whose provisions they would like to utilize to make their judgments. And these treaties can only be used as interpretative guides in judicial reasoning. After domestication, the next stage is implementation. Madam Chair and honorable members, you'll note that unless treaties are domesticated, they are of not particular use to us. So how do we domesticate these treaties? One is that we have to develop policies and regulations. We must establish who the implementing institutions are. Sometimes the treaties are cast so wide that it's difficult to know which particular MDA is responsible for this. We have to train public officials on how to implement these treaties. We have to allocate the necessary financial resources. We have to conduct public awareness. We have to monitor compliance. And then many treaties provide for preparing reports. As the PS had already hinted, is that many a times we are required to make periodic reports, especially to the treaties on human rights obligations and many other treaties. So we prepare reports to the UN committees on human rights and others on how we are implementing many of the provisions of these treaties. As I conclude, Chair, let me talk about the challenges in treaty making. Although we've made a lot of progress in treaty making, like the previous speaker noted, is we seem to have a lot of ad hoc ratifications. We have a lot of delays in ratifications. The process is so lengthy and costly. You must undertake a number of consultations. Two is some MDAs are not even aware of the process, so they think that every treaty must be ratified by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs only ratifies instruments that are within its portfolio. All other treaties are ratified by the line ministries, and Foreign Affairs only finalizes the last process of ratification. The process of domestication is very slow. Even after we have ratified the instruments, we take forever to domesticate them. The Uganda Law Reform Commission is doing a lot of work in terms of reforming our laws, but it's still slow in that regard. We have a number of overlapping mandates, as already has been mentioned, so we don't know which ministry takes the lead on what treaty. The issues to do with capacity and resource constraints, there is inadequate funding, that goes without saying. There is limited technical capacity. Some treaties require us to have a certain level of capacity that we may not necessarily have. So we have shortages of specialized expertise in areas such as nuclear energy and others. We have delays in reporting. Reporting is a very cumbersome process, and because of that, we are falling behind on a number of reports. The other is coordination and awareness. Again, weak interagency coordination. There is insufficient collaboration among MDAs. There is low public awareness of Uganda's international obligations, which reduces compliance and accountability. Madam Chair, on recommendations, one is when it comes to treaty making, we should have early stakeholder consultations, at least engage the relevant MDAs, ensure that our national interests are defined and fully reflected in these treaty texts. We should conduct thorough reviews before we ratify. Sometimes we ratify and then we realize we cannot meet the obligations. And then there are delays. We could prevent the delays in domestication if we just had pre-ratification legal and policy reviews. We would need really robust parliamentary oversight for Parliament to continue monitoring treaty implementation, stronger interagency coordination, and public awareness. In conclusion, Chair, treaty-making process in Uganda is not a single event, but is a continuous legal and institutional process. It begins with negotiations, relies on a number of expertise and coordination of MDAs. It proceeds through to ratification and domestication, and then culminates in the implementation and oversight. Each stage is essential to ensuring that Uganda's international commitments are lawful, credible, and enforceable. Parliament performs an indispensable constitutional role throughout this process. It scrutinizes implementing legislation, it appropriates financial resources, it monitors government performance through your committee work, your debates, ministerial statements, and it ensures accountability for the fulfillment of Uganda's international obligation. This oversight, Chair, promotes transparency, accountability, and good governance, while ensuring that international commitments are translated into practical outcomes for Uganda and Ugandans. I thank you, Chair, for your attention, and I welcome questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. And it's giving us a new area to focus. So my question would still remain that are there any treaties particularly of interest to us as this committee? Because I didn't see it come out. I was waiting for that, but we give it time for other members also to ask. So let's go to the next presentation, which is contemporary global geopolitical trends and their implications for Uganda's foreign policy and national interest.
Thank you, Chair. I hope my presentation will be put up. My name is Karugaba Michael. I head the Department of International Political Cooperation. I'll try to be quick. Since we are moving towards lunchtime, I don't want to hold it. But my introduction is that the global geopolitical terrain in the world today is undergoing a most profound transformation since the end of the Cold War in the 1990s, which followed the dissolution of the Soviet Union. After that dissolution, we had a long era of a predominantly what we can call a unipolar world, which was led mostly by the United States and is now giving way to what we term a multipolar, contested global order that is characterized by strategic competition among several major powers, shifting economic centers, technological disruptions, climate insecurity, demographic changes, and evolving patterns of conflict that many of us are perhaps familiar with today. For Uganda, these developments present both strategic challenges that affect our national interests, but also avail us with significant opportunities which the country and our foreign policy can take advantage of. And the obligation on us is to increasingly balance these challenges and take advantage of them for the national progress. In this presentation, we will identify some major geopolitical trends that are shaping the international environment. We will also hint on foreign policy directions that our government can consider in order to safeguard Uganda's long-term national interests. Now, next slide. What are Uganda's national interests? If you scan through our constitution, the 1995 constitution, you should be able to sum up our national interest into three pillars. One, the preservation of national sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence, including the protection of our national identity, the image of the country, and our global standing. My colleagues have mentioned a lot about our image abroad and our global standing. Secondly, the promotion of national peace and security, which includes the protection of all our citizens, both at home and abroad, and their property, peaceful coexistence, good neighborliness, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. Third and last, in our scope of national interest, is the pursuit of national prosperity, citizens' welfare, and sustainable development, including the quest for economic growth and expansion of the social services such as health and education. Now, there are a number of global trends that impact these national interests. They will go up to about 15 or more that are of critical importance for us. But I'll mostly highlight about 6 and then mention the rest for us to reflect and consider. I'll begin with the major ones that we can quickly point to. Number 1, the emergence of a multipolar world. The international system today is transitioning from the US-led Western predominance towards a more multipolar world. This change involves the rise of China. We are very familiar with this. A more independent thinking Europe. There are a number of right-wing governments in Europe today that are increasingly taking independent stands on many global issues. Look at Italy, look at Spain. They are actually many times at odds with the USA, which has led a unipolar world for some time. The resurgence of Russia. We know what is going on globally in terms of Russia and the reach that it is making, both in Europe and also in parts of Africa. The emergence of India and other middle powers such as Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Qatar. You very well know they are leading the mediation in the Middle East. The UAE, Indonesia, and in Africa, South Africa and Egypt as well. These are what you could classify as middle powers at the moment. They hold significant sway in terms of global influence. This means that global power is now increasingly distributed among several centers rather than being concentrated in one. What are the implications of this for Uganda? Like I said, sometimes they pose challenges, but they also pose opportunities for us as a country. These competing political, economic, and social influences present and challenge on how we build close friendships and partnerships. Build close partnerships with one country and you risk being estranged with another. Build partnerships with one bloc and you risk being estranged with another. So that is a challenge that for us as diplomatic practitioners, we have to navigate very carefully. However, this multipolarity also avails us with diverse sources of development finance and technical support that can be used to fuel our national prosperity. So it impinges our national interest both ways. It can be positive, but it can also be challenging. What are the foreign policy imperatives that we can adopt here to navigate this emergence of a multipolar world? Uganda should avoid aligning exclusively with any specific global power, while strategically balancing competing partnerships. Additionally, the country should continue leveraging collective influence achieved through forums such as the African Union, the Non-Aligned Movement, the BRICS, and the G77 plus China to navigate situations of potential clash with individual global powers. I must add here that we have utilized our chairmanship of the Non-Aligned Movement very positively in this regard. There is a war, for example, that is going on in the Middle East, and our chairmanship of NAM has strategically placed us to navigate the pitfalls that would have arisen in terms of alignment with any side within that war. Our position has commonly been the NAM position, and that's it. But we have maintained our friendship and partnership with the powers that are involved in that war, with the USA, with Iran, and with Israel. So utilizing these platforms is key for us as government and as a ministry. Number two, another trend is particularly the rise of China. It's a situation now that influences nearly every region of the world, both directly and indirectly. Africa has become an important arena for their competition, the competition between the USA and China. There is a growing need for critical minerals such as gold, lithium, cobalt, graphite, even oil. There is a need for markets for manufactured products. These great powers are also increasingly seeking security cooperation and multilateral support, especially in UN platforms in New York and in Geneva. Russia is also simultaneously recovering from the end of the Cold War and is now expanding its diplomatic, security, and economic footprint across Africa. What are the implications for Uganda's national interests? The competition between the great powers could potentially entangle Uganda into their geopolitical rivalries. It is possible, if not navigated carefully. However, it also avails Uganda an opportunity to attract favorable financing and strategic investments. Either of these powers are willing to cooperate more in order to gain favor in areas such as energy, to support industrialization, and also investments that support local beneficiation, and also in the security support sector. What are the foreign policy imperatives? Uganda should therefore carefully navigate the geopolitical rivalries of the great powers while taking advantage of these competing suitors. Uganda's foreign policy should increasingly emphasize strategic non-alignment. Like I have already mentioned, we've utilized NAM very effectively. Non-alignment, South-South cooperation, while maintaining constructive relations with the major powers, which we have done in the Middle East. Next slide. The other global trend today is the emergence of asymmetrical security threats. Security these days can be defined in several ways. There are several complex security challenges that are unfolding around the world. Many times we've known terrorism, but now it is being fueled by violent extremism, cyber threats, organized crime, illicit financial flows, trafficking in persons. My PS mentioned that. Misinformation. We are in an information age, and misinformation is ripe. Many of us who use social media know this. There are many posts that will come out, and within seconds you get to know that it's misinformation that looked genuine and is able to create disharmony. Hybrid warfare. We've heard of drone warfare and the use of AI in conflict. All these unconventional security threats are already present around us, including in our region, especially in our neighborhood. The security threats are becoming unconventional in the way they are conducted, and they impact us. They have brought enormous instability to many countries in the neighborhood, which impacts Uganda in many ways. What are the implications for our national interest? Uganda has occasionally experienced insecurity spillovers, especially on the western border, leading to the loss of life and property. Such cross-border spillovers affect our country's territorial integrity. Remember, our national interest is to maintain and protect our territorial integrity. They disrupt peaceful coexistence and good neighborliness, which is part of our national interest. They impede regional integration. My colleague spoke a lot about regional integration. Infrastructure development. She also spoke about transnational infrastructure. And they disable the growth of our tourism industry. Regional instability has also imposed a heavy refugee burden on Uganda. We currently host close to 2 million refugees because of the security situation, especially in our region. Cyber insecurity is on the rise, and it causes financial losses and illicit financial outflows. What are the foreign policy directives that we have? Uganda should continue engaging other countries through bilateral frameworks, such as JPCs, political consultation, and cross-border meetings, to mitigate the impacts of insecurity in these neighboring countries. Additionally, we should engage through multilateral platforms. My colleague spoke about multilateral platforms such as EAC, the Great Lakes region, the African Union, and IGAD. The country should also continue strengthening its security credentials through peacekeeping, mediation, and refugee protection. It is important for us as a ministry to also attract investment in IT security, which has become even more important today. The IT threats are many, and IT security is paramount. We can't run away from it. Fortunately, this is part of our ECD strategy to attract investment in these key areas. Number 4, I'll try to be quick, Madam Chair. Climate change is another global trend that is increasingly impacting Uganda's national interests. We know what is unfolding in Karamoja today. And also, climate change is leading to open conflict, mainly over land and water resources. Uganda remains vulnerable to climatic changes despite contributing minimally to global emissions. Many communities remain susceptible to drought, floods, and landslides, which affect their well-being and slows down our national development. Enormous national resources are being committed to disaster management, which should have gone to spurring our national prosperity. The foreign policy imperatives here are that climate diplomacy is of critical importance for us today. Uganda's foreign policy should and will be focusing on advocating for climate-related financing, adaptation funding, and appropriate technology transfer to mitigate the effects of climate change. The issue of carbon credits is becoming of interest for us today. Uganda should additionally consider strongly pursuing green industrialization, which will attract investment and partnership globally. Number 5, the energy transition. While renewable energy is expanding rapidly, oil and gas remain strategically important globally. Uganda's petroleum resources therefore remain very valuable during this era of energy transition. However, we should remain cognizant that international investors are increasingly favoring low carbon investments. How does this impact us? We are not yet selling our oil abroad. So it is something that we have to reflect on. Will Uganda's oil bring national prosperity in a world that is increasingly advocating for energy transition away from fossil fuels? That is a question that we should reflect on deeply. What are the foreign policy imperatives here? Uganda's economic and commercial diplomacy should therefore market responsible petroleum development. Responsible petroleum development, alongside the development of more renewable energy sources, such as hydropower. We should not walk away from that. Solar energy, and also nuclear energy. If we are going to transform this country, we need more energy than you can imagine. Many of these developing countries may not run on solar power. It's not a surprise that many of them are now continuing to build a lot of nuclear plants. This is a field that we should look at with intent, because the energy that is required to transform our country to first world is a lot. Diplomacy should advocate for a just energy transition as well for developing countries like Uganda, which for now we simply need energy at the moment in order to catch up with the industrial world. 6, and this is perhaps the last of the major trends that I'll mention, Madam Chair, and then I'll outline the rest, is the impact of technological disruptions. The emergence of new technologies, and especially artificial intelligence, is affecting almost every aspect of life, ranging from health to security and diplomacy. The challenge lies in the increasingly centered around artificial intelligence, the use of advanced algorithms for decision making, cybersecurity, and data governance. I will give a very quick example. There was a time I served in the consular department, and we had an issue with a VIP who was traveling abroad. And this person apparently did not get a visa, and yet was traveling for an official trip. And when we inquired to the visa issuing countries, the consular officer mentioned that it was as a result of the decision of an algorithm that they were using in their visa system. If, for example, your first name is Osama and your second name is Chomhendo, Osama Chomhendo, the algorithm is more likely to identify one of your names and flag it. Doesn't matter whether you're a minister or not. And what happens then, your application is sent into a second reassessment. So this is AI that is at work. It has partially taken the role of persons, somebody who would clearly read and say, oh, this is a Ugandan minister, and then take a decision. But now you have artificial intelligence which does not know that you are a minister, but simply flags you. Now at the secondary level of review is when the individual steps in and says, but this is a Ugandan minister, and then you get cleared. Fortunately, that individual was cleared later. But after, of course, a lot of back and forth. So these are the impacts of technological disruptions that we are getting today in today's world. Now, this requires for us as well in Uganda to adopt quickly to this global environment. The question arises, how is Uganda coping, or at least preparing for disruptions arising out of these new technologies? They are in everything. They are in medicine, they are in visa issuance, they are in diplomacy. Some countries are operating chatbots to respond to your inquiries about foreign policy. You don't have an individual on the other side. It is a chatbot that has some parameters within which it responds. So how are we preparing as Uganda to enter this new age? Foreign policy imperatives. Uganda's strategy for commercial diplomacy will seek, therefore, to attract more investment in digital infrastructure and innovations, cybersecurity, and also build a citizenry with knowledge and skills in digital and ICT fields. Capacity building in these areas should be continuous due to rapidly evolving technologies. Now, Chair, like I said, I'll simply mention the other global trends so that we are able to conclude in time for lunch. Several other trends are impacting Uganda's national interests. The dawn of the information age, I've already spoken about that, and the management of social media. The power of social media today is something we cannot run away from. The stories seem to run ahead of us, all of us, both in politics, but also in diplomacy. How do we adjust? Global demographic shifts. We have a younger African population versus the aging world around us. And the impact of this relates to even the migration that my permanent secretary talked about. There is a window for younger people to go and work in many of these populations that are aging. So how do we adapt to this? Are we ready to tap into the demographic dividend as Uganda? Global health challenges, pandemic outbreaks. We had recently COVID-19. You very well know how it impacted us. Of recent, we have had Ebola. As of today, there are certain countries that say, Uganda, not yet, you can't travel here. There are some visa restrictions, but this is something that we are overcoming. We've already been declared Ebola free, and engagements are going on to have some of these restrictions lifted. So global health challenges is another evolving trend. Migration, we've already spoken a lot about migration. Can we stem the flow of migrants, or should we simply utilize our migrants for national development? You may have heard the use of diaspora to enable national development. The remittances from our diaspora are enormous. How do we balance it? Do we continue to let our young people go and then use their resources for national development? Or do we insist on creating greener pastures here such that they remain here and spur development from within? There is a balancing act that we have to to do. The weaponization of trade and unilateral actions, the PS and my earlier colleague spoke about tariffs and non-tariff barriers. Will the ESC common market work? Will the African Continental Free Trade Area take off? The blue economy, competition over the seas and oceans, the future of ocean mining. These oceans belong to all of us. They don't belong to individual countries. How does Uganda play a part in exploiting those oceans? They are ours as well. Not just ours, but as well. The crypto world. Where does Africa and Uganda fit in? You've heard of cryptocurrencies and exchanges online. Space and space technology. Where is Africa's involvement in outer space exploration? In conclusion, Chair, parliamentary support is needed. The Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Affairs can indeed support the ministry in this fast evolving environment by one, understanding these major global challenges and following them up on how they affect the national interest and foreign policy. It is very important that as Parliament you keep your focus on these evolving trends in the world and how they impact us. Secondly, by providing advocacy for the ministry within Parliament. Thirdly, by projecting national unity abroad and a good image of the country. All of us have the duty to protect and safeguard the image of this country. It is our country. So Parliament can really help us out on this. Fourthly, my peers talked about complementing executive diplomacy through parliamentary diplomacy by working diligently through institutions such as the IPU, of which our Parliament is a member, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, and the Pan-African Parliament. Your efforts there will be very helpful for us, and they will complement our work. And finally, by supporting the allocation of adequate funding, resources for this ministry to meet all those gaps in terms of contributions, to take care of your diplomats very well as they serve abroad, to ensure that our properties are very well maintained and more are acquired. So your role is key, and we are counting on you as our committee to support us in this regard. Uganda can convert the current global geopolitical shifts into opportunities for regional peace and security, sustainable development. This approach is on the whole consistent with Uganda's constitutional principles of foreign policy and the country's long-term development aspirations under Vision 2030. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Has been a long sitting as well. For us in Parliament now, we have been very creative when we want to re-energize. We do some exercises, and that's why Bob is here. So you will learn from us also today. Bob, over to you. A 5 minutes break. We have this exercise. You go to the washroom, then we come back to ask questions. Thank you. Let's settle so we can ask our questions in the next 2 minutes. I will give opportunity to our colleagues who came later and didn't introduce themselves, and then we pick questions. First introduction, members.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair and honorable colleagues. You are most welcome, the Permanent Secretary and all your staff. And my name is Wembabas Beatrice, the Woman Member of Parliament, Hoima District. May I go ahead with my question?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, my first question goes to the second presenter about the regional integration. Why the government of Uganda is advancing in regional integration and other citizens, our people in Uganda still face a lot of challenges, especially regarding to language, education system which is different from others, the regulatory framework, among other challenges. Is there any way, or is there any step that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is taking to help Ugandans benefit fully from this regional integration? The second comment is about the treaties. Thank you, Madam Nyakato, for the comprehensive presentation about the treaty making in Uganda. You talked about the processes of negotiation, signing, and ratifications. I would like to engage myself on the negotiation process. Don't you think it is also imperative for the Parliament of Uganda to be included in the negotiation process before the treaty is taken ahead, so that we can avoid and know the financial implications, the national interest, and also mitigate other challenges ahead? Thank you.
Thank you. I had given opportunity for introductions, but you had a question. That was okay. So members, introduce yourselves. Then I see two honorable members here. We shall pick questions.
Thank you, Chair, colleagues, and our visitors. My name is Achom Alobo Joan, the woman MP for Sorority City.
Thank you, Chair. The members of Parliament, my name is Kenya Wuma. I'm the woman member of Parliament, Konya District.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ruth Katushave, woman member of Parliament, Komansimbi District.
Thank you. Let's get the questions.
Protazio Begumisa is my name.
Yes.
I'm the MP for Ndorwa County, East Kawale. I received a concern from some Ugandans who are based in Canada. Their children, I think, are Canadians because they are born there. But those Ugandans would love to come back with their children, but they tell me that they face difficulties getting visas, Ugandan visas. It surprised me. Well, probably it's internal affairs, but how can foreign affairs help such Ugandans? Because we are trying to get people to come and invest here. This particular group that I know is very wealthy. They have money, they want to come and build apartments here, but they are having some difficulties. The second question, just clarification. The presentation on treaties, I didn't hear much about tax treaties, and I wondered whether they also go through the same processes. Some clarification on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dennis Omodi Aliela. I represent the people of Lira City East in the store of Parliament, and I'm a member of this committee. I have two precise questions. I come from a constituency where there are many business community, or many businessmen and women, and their trading partner is the Republic of South Sudan. And recently, the Republic of South Sudan introduced a visa fees for Ugandans going to South Sudan to do trade. I would like to know from the PS and the team of Foreign Affairs what they have done to ensure that a visa-free entry is being accorded to Ugandans like Ugandans accord to South Sudanese. Secondly, what measures are being taken or put in place in collaboration with South Sudan to address the challenges faced by Ugandan traders, including harassment, and to ensure that their safety and fair treatment under the bilateral and regional agreement is honored? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. We shall end with Ruth and then we come to Honorable Nora.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wanted to find out from the Permanent Secretary, given Uganda's immense wealth in critical and strategic minerals such as gold, rare earth elements, and base metals, and aggressive global race for these resources by major external powers, especially China. How is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs aligning its diplomatic and economic frameworks to prevent resource exploitation and sovereign debt risks? Specifically, what proactive foreign policy instruments are being deployed beyond domestic laws like the Mining and Mineral Act to ensure that bilateral agreements mandate local value addition, technology transfer, and strict environmental accountability rather than exporting our raw wealth at the expense of our future generations? You look at the case study, go to Busia, where there's Wagagai mining gold. The same company is also mining gold in Namaingo. If you go to Busia, nothing has changed. The status quo is still the same. People are still very poor, but they're mining these very rich minerals. That is going away. The roads are still the same. What are we doing in terms of holding accountable? These companies have a responsibility to play in terms of developing these areas. And then lastly is on the treaties. Uganda signed the treaties. I'm very, very much interested in the treaty that Uganda signed with Egypt, especially on our waters, the River Nile water. We cannot use this water for irrigation. Even during this dry spell, people are crying. There's a lot of famine and all that. But we have the water, the resource. Our countries like Sudan, Khartoum, Egypt itself, they're using this water for irrigation. But the treaty that we signed, if even some of us who are born, restricts us from using this water. How? It's very unfair. How do we walk back on this treaty? I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask the PS to further clarify for me about accreditation You gave an example of Kenya being accredited to some countries, and then therefore our embassy needs to, I don't know, do what? Okay, how Uganda comes in. And maybe through you, Chair, to suggest that maybe these officials can create a desk where you could co-opt us here so that we give muscle to the investors who come and find frustrations in other places. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Nora.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, allow me to thank the PS and his team for ably enabling us have a clear oversight of what is taking place in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Honorable Chair, my question goes to Madam Anne Mary Nyakato. In your presentation, you did indicate that Uganda lacks a specific statute or regulation governing the entire treaty-making process, but it relies on the Vienna Convention and the law of treaties that was put in place in 1969. I want to find out from you whether the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or Uganda has got a plan of having a specific statute to have this in place. Then you too, I'd also want to be informed by the PS or any other person within the team are fully aware that Uganda as a country would not have a single formally codified or standalone foreign policy document. Does it apply to all the countries, only us? And if that's not the case, when do we intend to have this as a country? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Honorable Tana.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mine is very brief in interest of time. I believe Madame Namutebi mentioned about scaling down, and she presented our outstanding on subscriptions, which was approximately 24 million. And if I am to do the mathematics, the billing is still going on. So by the end of this financial year, we would have approximately $8 more million that we would have to pay. So A, what plan do we have? B, do we have an analysis before we scale down on return on investment, permission, and perhaps the different fora that we subscribe to? What are they actually contributing to our economy? What kind of investments? What kind of tourists? What are the numbers? And the money that we are paying, is it really justified? So if that information can be provided, thank you.
Thank you. And maybe lastly from me, following on what Honorable Nora has talked about our policies, the last presentation about the trend, the geopolitical trend, puts a lot of challenges on Uganda, new emerging issues of the artificial intelligence, of the market, and many things here. Do we still feel comfortable having whatever policy status we have been using as it is, or it is now time even to review our policy and see how we strategize and position ourselves in the global arena? Over to you, PS.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, for your questions and interventions. I'm going to request colleagues, the head of RPS, you had some questions there. I hope you noted them. Yes, can you go first?
Thank you. One was, I'm sorry I didn't pick the names, but that question was to do with the steps that the ministry has taken in supporting Ugandans to benefit from integration. Like we mentioned, the ministry lobbies for job placements for Ugandans in these agencies. We are always at the table. We ascertain that we are at the table when decisions are being taken, so that they are taken within our interests, in line with our interests. Then we do cross-border support. We support cross-border trade and cross-border communities to live together, to integrate together. Under the ESC, we have that leeway of 15 kilometers into each other's countries without need for visa. We ascertain that countries do abide by that, and we also do that as Uganda. For private sector, I think those are the major benefits. We are private sector. Private sector is the major beneficiary of our engagement because we, under economic integration, we support the private sector to trade well. The PS gave an example of the recent visit by Tanzania Sugar Board Authority to ascertain that our sugar goes to Tanzania without restrictions, as it has been the case. So I know that in the questioning there was the Honorable alluded to education and language. I didn't pick that well as I was just coming through. But for Swahili, to the extent that even Swahili is our national language. So as in terms of implementation and cascading it down to the grassroots, it is all our duty to ascertain that we learn Swahili, we embrace it, because for sure, according to our constitution, it is their national language. In terms of other languages like French, Chinese, the ministry lobbies for scholarships for Ugandans to undertake that, and many have benefited. We have Alliance Française that also offers French courses, French programs to Ugandans, and even now Swahili, and even now Chinese. So really the onus is on us to promote and help our people learn all these languages so that they can easily compete. The next honorable who asked about a regional issue was to do with South Sudan. Ugandans going to South Sudan, South Sudan is coming to Uganda visa free, and us going to South Sudan after paying visas. Yes, well, in principle, we look like we are paying visas, but it's not the South Sudanese policy for Ugandans to pay visas. No. That is extortion that we as the ministry have talked about, and actually recently, was it last week, we had a meeting in Arua Gulu to address this. All the border districts were represented from both sides of the country, and Ugandans we put our foot down saying, yes, our people pay. We even had video clips. We showed them the clips of the transporters talking about the so many roadblocks they encountered, and for each roadblock. But well, they explained it as a governance issue. Governance because while we have central government, for them they have kind of a federal, the states are kind of autonomous. So you move from Equatoria going to another state, you pay. You move to another state, you pay. However, as much as they have those governance issues, under the ESC, for which we all subscribe, it's supposed to be free movement, and we are not even supposed to be paying visas. But while Ugandans continue to pay, South Sudan says it's extortion that is not sanctioned by government. As a result of that, we agreed that we do a joint permanent commission meeting before the end of September to address all these challenges that were highlighted in that cross-border engagement that we had last week. So yes, it is true some of those things are happening, but most of it is extortion. It's not government policy. Then what measures? Yes, I think I've talked about that. And also the other challenge with South Sudan, we face with South Sudan, is the issue of territory, territorial reaffirmation. As perhaps you may not know, but we haven't reaffirmed our borderline between Uganda and South Sudan since our independence. So while we think some territory belongs to us, they think it is theirs. But because of maybe the Apande here will talk about, will know the strategic patience that our leadership has. So some of these things, because of being patient, we are the guarantors of peace. There are things we cannot really do to a baby that we are nurturing. So we need to be patient. Strategic patience is needed for when we are engaging with some of these countries. But it's true, we have not reaffirmed our borderline. So some of these things come up because we do not even know where our line stops. As much as Ministry of Land says they know, but we need to reaffirm. And that also needs money. We need money to do that. But yes, the extortion is not really government policy because they are members of ESC. Then the issue of a treaty that restricts us from using the Nile water. I think that was also an RPS question, regional integration question. Yes, that treaty exists under the Nile. It's to do with the River Nile. But that is why we have the Nile Basin Initiative, and we are members of the Nile Basin Initiative. Maybe we also need to know that we have moved from Nile Basin because of that same reason. It's now a commission to address such. And because of it's now a commission and we are pushing for that as a country, negotiations are still undergoing, and we are the chair. Uganda is the chair of the Nile Basin Commission. And you have heard of the GAD, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Despite that clause, GAD has been put up, as much as there are challenges being faced, but countries have come up to say enough is enough, and Uganda is steering that. Actually, even the last summit of the Nile Basin Initiative was hosted by Uganda. So we are doing everything possible as a country to ascertain that there is revision to some of those treaties that we signed before we are where we are. Those are the questions.
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe, Madam Chair, before I invite Anne to respond, I'll say two things, or one on the Sudan, South Sudan, and then another on the treaty. On South Sudan, it's important that the committee appreciates the leadership dynamics in South Sudan. The areas that border Uganda, I think, are primarily led by SPLM IO, which is by and large opposition. And they have their administration, and indeed, they're the ones who impose taxes. A week or so ago, there was some misinformation, and I think that's what the honorable member was alluding to, that South Sudan shall start charging visas for Ugandans that travel to South Sudan. The authorities in Juba dismissed it as fake news, and we also regard it as such. So it's not true that Ugandans shall be starting to pay visas. Now, on the Nile Treaty, it's true, there is a 1929 treaty that was signed by Britain and Egypt. Britain on behalf, I think, of the East African countries, but Uganda and other East African countries disagreed. And indeed, when we got independence, we disregarded that treaty. It is the reason we are in position to construct our dams on the River Nile, as well as our colleagues in Ethiopia who have indeed constructed the Grand Renaissance Dam. So it's not a treaty that we, should I say, adhere to, but we've had discussions over time within the framework of the Nile Basin Initiative that has since transitioned to the Nile Basin Commission. We have been very steadfast and insisted that there should be responsible use of the Nile. In fact, Egypt has been arguing that the use of the Nile waters should be by consensus. The argument is that there should be consensus. If there is no consensus, therefore nobody should use the Nile waters. And I think majority of the member states within the Nile Basin Commission have not agreed to the use of the term consensus. Consensus means there are veto powers. If there is no consensus and Egypt vetoes, it means you can't use the Nile waters. So that, as it is, has not been agreed. So I'll invite Anne to take on the issues on treaties, treaty formulation. I'm sure you wrote the questions.
Thank you, PS. Thank you, Madam Chair, and all the honorable members of Parliament that have made comments or questions to my presentation. Chair, I'll start with your particular comment. You said that I had not given you a list of the instruments that we've ratified and those that were of interest to us. Just to say, Chair, that on average, we ratify about 5 to 8 multilateral instruments a year. That's not in regard also to bilateral agreements. But just to give you a rough idea on what we are currently working on, under Labour, we are working together with the Ministry of Gender on ratifying the conventions on occupational health and safety that fall under the ILO. Under water and natural resources, we are currently working with the Ministry of Water on the Convention on the protection and use of transboundary water resources. In terms of disarmament, we are currently working on the Convention on the prohibition and transfer of cluster munitions. With regard to regional integration, we are currently working on the ratification of the African Convention on Cross-Border Cooperation. My colleague talked about the Blue Ocean. We are also working on the convention, the UN Convention on the Conservation and Sustainable Use of Marine Biological Diversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. We are also working with the Ministry of Gender on the ratification of and signing of the AU Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. And crime, transnational crime, we're currently working on the ratification of the Convention on Cybercrime and also the AU Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. So we're working on a number of conventions and protocols that require ratification. And that's in regard to your question, Chair. In regard to the question from the Honourable Member on whether Parliament has a role in the negotiation of treaties, I would like to say that the Constitution specifically places the responsibility of negotiation of treaties in the executive with the President or a person appointed by the President, and Parliament is only given the role of oversight and ratification on only specific treaties. In regard to the Honourable Member of Parliament who asked about tax treaties, let me just say that taxation is really a sovereign mandate, so there are not a number of treaties that go into areas of taxation, but even when they are, they still go through the process of ratification as agreed. But just to say that there are multilateral treaties on taxation only, really, for example, the treaty on with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, it's only in regard to trying and ensure facilitating trade, eliminating trade barriers to cross-border trade. Other than that, a number of tax treaties are really bilateral. So as Uganda, we have a number of double taxation agreements, and these double tax avoidance of double taxation agreements, and they are really to encourage foreign direct investment. Even those particular agreements have to be ratified, and the process is usually handled between Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Finance. Chair, PS has already elaborated on the issue of the treaty on Egypt, but just to say that, to add to that, that there is a cooperative framework agreement that really governs the Nile Basin framework. It's been ratified by majorly all the member states apart from Egypt and Sudan, and it's that framework that guides the management of the Nile Basin, among others. So it's true that we're trying to walk away from that colonial treaty and moving towards more progressive frameworks that consider all interests of members that are concerned with the River Nile. Chair, the Honourable Member, Honourable Nora, asked about the purpose, the need of regulations on the Convention of the Law of the Treaties. Chair, I must admit that we have not attempted to develop regulations. that govern negotiation, mainly because the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties has really achieved what they call the customary law on treaties. So it governs literally all member states on how treaties are negotiated. That said, that we began a process of expanding or developing guidelines for our Ratification Act. Chair, as you'll note, the Ratification Act is the shortest act we have. It has about 5 sections and leaves it to the Minister in consultation with the Ministry of Justice to develop guidelines to guide how ratification processes will be done. So we had begun a process with the first Parliamentary Council on developing guidelines for that, and maybe perhaps we need to resurrect that process. Chair, I hope I've answered the questions that came, but I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Chair, if I may just address the last ones. One was on Canadian citizens who want to visit Uganda and are finding difficulties in getting visas. We would need to get more information and perhaps assist in facilitating the acquisition of visas. But otherwise, we've not had people having challenges in getting visas, but we are happy to assist. On critical minerals and rare earth minerals specifically and their exploitation, Chair, as you'll appreciate and as I said earlier, our role pretty much is coordination. And in our role of coordination, we insist on government's policy on not exporting raw materials. So for all the investors we have attempted to mobilize in the field of minerals, we have been extremely clear that there are no minerals that are going to be taken without any value being added. And that policy, I think, is being implemented by the Ministry of Energy, and actually the President has guided that the minerals would rather stay in the ground than being taken without value addition. And we are beginning to receive individuals who indeed want to add value on our minerals within the country before they are exported. And that's what the Honourable Member made reference to Wagagai in Busia, and that's exactly what Wagagai is doing. Now, he raised an issue of the infrastructure in the area not changing. I think, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, I think that's we as Uganda that need to pursue a certain policy. To the best of our knowledge, they applied for a license to mine gold in the area, and they gave them a license to mine gold without any other term and or condition. But what we know is that Wagagai is paying annually around $35 million in taxes. So perhaps on account of that, Parliament may decide that there is some affirmative action for Busia as or Bokedi as a region where the gold is being mined, so that their infrastructure can be improved. Madam Chair, on the issue, the example I gave of Kenya, I can also give Tanzania. There is also our mission in Washington, D.C. that is accredited to a number of countries. Our mission in Washington, D.C. is accredited to Brazil. They are accredited to Panama, among others. So the example I gave about Kenya being accredited to Seychelles is the fact that we don't have an embassy in those countries, so these embassies of ours service those countries because of the opportunities that we have or that we see in those areas. So that's the example I was giving about Kenya. Madam Chair, before I handle the last issue, the Honorable Turner did mention, picked up on Edith's proposal to scale down, and whether we have done an assessment on the return on investment. Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, there are some institutions that we subscribe to simply because the chief diplomat, who is actually the president, sees the value in coordinating peace and security efforts. And the peace and security dividend outweighs the resources that we may be using to subscribe. Such institutions are IGAD, the Intergovernmental Authority for Development. IGAD, some of us had made an argument that maybe since IGAD serves more or less the same purpose as the EAC and other institutions, the same as ICJLR, but we've been guided that the work that they do in pacifying countries such as the Sudan is more important, because in fact a lot of our products were being bought by Sudan, Khartoum, but because of the war, those exports have since disappeared. So the chief diplomat sees the value in these institutions in pacifying the region, and therefore feels we should continue to associate and subscribe to them. He has written, not once, not twice, to the Minister of Finance, directing that they find resources for subscription. But unfortunately, those resources are never forthcoming. We know for a fact that on an annual basis, we need around 25 billion to meet all our international subscription needs. Those resources are never provided year in, year out. Last financial year, we were given around 17.6 billion for areas. This financial year, I think we have around 1.4 billion for areas. So you can imagine the situation. And indeed, if we don't pay, we shall find ourselves in hundreds. And I think it's based on that frustration that colleagues feel there is a need to scale down, do an assessment, and perhaps pull out of some, instead of the continuous accumulation of subscription fees that we are not meeting. Lastly, Madam Chair, is on the issue of our foreign policy. Madam Chair, indeed, in the last Parliament, and I think the parliaments before, we have explained that, as you'll appreciate, all policies must go through a 360 stakeholder consultation process. Our foreign policy, actually the President being the chief diplomat, the chief advisor, or the person who directs on a foreign policy, must give a nod to the policy to go forward. We can actually not present it to cabinet, to him who chairs the cabinet, before consulting him. That cannot happen. So we've sent a draft. We did send a draft for his consultation. In the meetings we have had with him, we have reminded him, and he has advised that he will get back to us. Honorable Chair, until he gets back to us and guides on how we proceed with the foreign policy, for now we rely on the objectives that are outlined in the Constitution for us to be able to annualize our plan through the ministerial policy statements to implement Uganda's foreign policy. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. By our time, it's 13:36 by my phone. I think it's just healthy to have a break. Somebody's okay. We have a break, a lunch break, and we do it first. We come back so we can catch up with the program. One of our topics has remained. We are pushing it for afternoon. Our guests will be led by our officer here for lunch, and for us members, we know how we get our lunch. But we are going, all of us are going to the canteen. And so on that note, let me invite you to lunch. If we can do it in 30 minutes, we'll be back by 2:15. Let's try that. Thank you. Welcome.
inspiring Uganda.
I'd like to thank all our